It all started on a Friday evening. My name's Jake. I'm 34, married to Lisa for 7 years. We met in college, built a life together, and settled into a comfortable routine. Lisa's best friend, Amber, was always around. They'd known each other since high school. Amber was practically family. That Friday, Lisa told me she and Amber were going out for drinks, just a girls' night. I stayed home, poured a whiskey, and lost myself in an old action flick. Around midnight, Lisa texted me, saying she was staying at Amber's since it was too late to drive back. Nothing unusual, she'd done this before. Weeks passed, and I noticed Lisa growing distant. She was on her phone constantly, texting, smiling at the screen. I chalked it up to stress or something harmless. Amber started showing up less, which was odd, considering how inseparable they were. One night, I came home early from work. The house was quiet, except for faint music coming from the upstairs bedroom. I walked up, expecting Lisa to be relaxing. The door was slightly open. I heard whispers and soft laughter, familiar voices. I froze. I pushed the door open. There they were, Lisa and Amber, caught in a moment that shattered everything. They noticed me too late. The room went silent except for the sound of my breathing. Lisa's face drained of color. Amber's expression was unreadable. I couldn't speak. Every part of my world twisted into something I didn't recognize. I walked out. I don't remember much after that, just driving aimlessly until the gas light came on. When I got home, Lisa was sitting on the couch, eyes red and swollen. "We need to talk," she said, voice trembling. I sat across from her, numb. She explained how it started, how she didn't mean for it to happen, how she was confused. Amber filled something she felt was missing. She swore she still loved me. I listened, detached, as if hearing someone else's story. Days turned into weeks. I couldn't stop replaying that moment in my head. I met with Amber once, demanded answers. She admitted she'd always felt something for Lisa but never acted until recently. She apologized but didn't seem regretful, more resigned. One night, Lisa begged for another chance. She said she was cutting ties with Amber and wanted to fix things. I believed her, wanted to believe her, so I agreed. Months later, things seemed better. We went to counseling, tried to rebuild. Then one night, her phone buzzed while she was in the shower. A message from Amber. "Miss you. Can't wait for next time." My chest tightened. I stared at the screen, feeling the familiar sting of betrayal. When she came out, I handed her the phone. "Explain this." Her face crumbled. No excuses, no lies this time. Just tears and silence. That was the last straw. I packed a bag and walked out, leaving behind the life we built. In the months that followed, I started over, new apartment, new job, new perspective. Last I heard, Lisa moved out of town. Amber disappeared from social media. Sometimes I wonder if they ended up together. I'll never know. Looking back, I realized the betrayal wasn't just the affair. It was the destruction of trust, the lies, the repeated choices. I learned that some things can't be fixed, no matter how much you want them to be. Now, when I think about love, I know it's not just about promises, it's about actions. Trust isn't something you rebuild with words. It's earned, and sometimes, once it's gone, there's no getting it back. Months passed, and life settled into something resembling normal. I rented a small apartment downtown, minimal furniture, just enough to feel like a place to crash rather than a home. I kept busy, work, the gym, even picked up running to fill the empty hours. But loneliness has a way of creeping in when the distractions stop. One night, after a long shift, I found myself sitting in a quiet bar near my building, the kind of place where no one asks questions and everyone's lost in their own stories. I was nursing my drink when someone sat down next to me. "Jake!" I turned. It was Amber. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. She looked different. Tired, thinner, but still unmistakably her. Before I could react, she ordered a drink and met my gaze. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said quietly. I could have walked away. I should have. But something kept me rooted. We talked. At first, it was surface level, polite but distant. Then, as the drinks flowed, the walls came down. She told me about her falling out with Lisa, how things between them burned out fast after I left. Amber admitted she never really wanted a relationship, just the thrill of something forbidden. There was no excuse, no attempt to rewrite history, just honesty. Raw, painful honesty. I should have left right then, but instead I stayed. Maybe it was the need for closure or the twisted comfort of familiar pain. By the time the bar closed, we were still talking about everything we should have said back then but didn't. Against all reason, I agreed to walk her home. Her place was a few blocks away. Small, cluttered, lived in. We lingered at the door, caught in a moment neither of us understood. "This is a bad idea," I said, breaking the silence. "I know," she whispered, "but it still feels like something unfinished." I walked away that night, but it didn't end there. We started meeting up, by chance at first, then intentionally. Conversations turned deeper. Past wounds reopened but somehow started healing too. It wasn't romantic, not in the traditional sense. There was too much history, too much brokenness. But there was understanding, something real in the mess of it all. One night, after too many drinks and too much shared vulnerability, she admitted something that shook me. "I never loved Lisa," she confessed. "I was just lost. You were the only real thing in all of it." It hit me like a punch. I'd spent so long thinking of her as the villain, the person who shattered my life, that I never considered she might be just as damaged, just as lost. For the first time, I saw her as more than my past. We never labeled whatever we had after that. Maybe we were afraid it would break under the weight of expectations. We were two people trying to make sense of something impossible. One rainy night, after another long, winding conversation, she kissed me, gentle, uncertain, as if asking for permission to exist in my life again. Against all reason, I kissed her back. We became something undefined, complicated, but honest. No secrets, no lies, just raw, imperfect connection. I don't know where this path leads. Maybe it's doomed, maybe it's redemption. But for the first time in a long time, I'm not running from the past. I'm living with it, messy, flawed, and real, and somehow that feels like enough. The weeks that followed were a strange blend of old memories and new beginnings. Amber and I fell into a rhythm that neither of us expected. We didn't talk about the past much, we didn't need to. It lingered in the spaces between us, unspoken but understood. One night, after a late dinner at a quiet diner we'd stumbled into by accident, she asked, "Do you ever think we're just setting ourselves up to crash again?" I thought about it for a moment. Probably, but maybe this time we know how to brace for impact. Amber smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides something deeper. Months passed, and what we had became less fragile. We spent nights wrapped in blankets on my worn-out couch, talking about everything. Our worst mistakes, our biggest regrets, and the lives we thought we'd have. There was something healing about being so painfully honest. No pretenses, no masks. But life has a way of testing even the strongest of reconciliations. One afternoon, I was grabbing coffee from a small cafe near work when I saw her. Lisa. She looked the same but different, like someone I used to know but couldn't place anymore. She spotted me before I could disappear, her face a mix of surprise and something I couldn't quite read. "Jake," she said, approaching cautiously. "Lisa," I replied, keeping my voice steady. We exchanged polite small talk. How she'd moved back to town for a new job. How she was trying to start fresh. Her eyes searched mine, looking for something familiar, something that might still belong to her. "I've missed you," she admitted quietly. "I know I have no right to say that, but I never stopped." I didn't know what to say. The weight of our shared past pressed down like an anchor, dragging me back to places I'd fought to leave behind. Before I could respond, she added, "Are you seeing anyone?" For a moment I hesitated. The answer felt complicated even though it shouldn't have. "I am," I finally said. Her expression faltered, just for a second, before she forced a smile. "I'm glad," she whispered. You deserve to be happy. As she walked away, I felt an odd mix of relief and sadness. She was my past. A part of me that would always be there no matter how much time passed. That night, I told Amber about seeing Lisa. She listened quietly, her expression unreadable. Does it change anything? She asked, voice steady but cautious. No, I said without hesitation. It's just closure, I guess. She nodded slowly, but something in her eyes shifted. A flicker of doubt or fear, maybe both. The next few weeks were strained. Amber grew distant, retreating into herself in ways that felt painfully familiar. Late one night, after a long silence stretched between us, she finally spoke. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of you, of what happens if we mess this up. I took her hands in mine, holding tight. We already messed it up once, but we're still here. For the first time in a long time, she let herself believe it. Life didn't magically become perfect after that. There were still nights when the past haunted us, still moments of doubt and uncertainty. But we faced them together, no lies, no running. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker below, she leaned her head against my shoulder and whispered, maybe we were always supposed to find our way back, even if it took breaking everything first. I didn't have an answer. Maybe she was right. Maybe some stories aren't meant to have clean endings or easy resolutions. Maybe the mess is the whole point. And for the first time in my life, that felt okay. The following weeks felt like we were living on borrowed time. Amber and I had rebuilt something fragile but real. We tried to believe that what we were creating could last, despite everything. But life doesn't care about your intentions. It has a way of twisting what you think you know. One night, Amber got a call while we were having dinner. Her expression changed the second she saw the number. She hesitated, muttering, I have to take this, before slipping out onto the balcony. I watched her through the glass door. Her shoulders were tense, her fingers gripping the phone tightly. Something wasn't right. When she came back in, she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Work stuff, she lied. Amber was a lot of things, but she was never a good liar. I didn't push her that night, but the seed of doubt was already planted. A few days later, I was heading back to my apartment after a late shift when I saw a figure standing near the building's entrance. As I got closer, my stomach twisted. It was Lisa. Jake, she called out softly, almost like she'd been waiting. What are you doing here? I asked, keeping my voice steady. I needed to talk about Amber. Her name hit me like a punch. What about her? Lisa hesitated, searching for the right words. I know you're with her now, but there's something you need to know. I crossed my arms. You lost the right to tell me what I need to know a long time ago. I'm serious, she insisted. Amber's not who you think she is. My pulse quickened. Spit it out. Lisa took a breath, her expression unreadable. Amber didn't just fall out of love with me. She left because she was running from something, someone. There's a reason she's back in town. I stared at her, trying to make sense of the words. What are you talking about? She owes people. Dangerous people. Lisa's voice dropped. When things ended between us, she got involved with someone. Someone bad. They were looking for her. I thought she left town for good. My head spun. This couldn't be real, Amber would have told me. But the memory of that tense phone call flashed in my mind. Why are you telling me this now? I demanded. Because I still care about you, Lisa said, her voice cracking. And I don't want you getting hurt. I walked away, leaving her standing there. I didn't believe her, or maybe I didn't want to. When I got back to the apartment, Amber was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at her phone. She jumped when I walked in, like she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. Who called you the other night? I asked sharply. Amber's eyes widened. What? Don't play dumb. Who was it? Her expression hardened, the walls going up instantly. It's none of your business. I took a step closer. It is if Lisa's right. The color drained from her face. You talked to Lisa? She came to me, said you were running from someone, owing people. My voice rose despite myself. What the hell is going on? Amber looked away, her jaw tightening. For a long moment I thought she wasn't going to answer. Then, quietly, she said, I thought I could keep you out of it. My chest tightened. Out of what? She took a shaky breath. I made mistakes after Lisa. Bad ones. I owed money. More than I could pay back. Her voice trembled. They found me. My mind reeled. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you involved, she snapped. I thought I could fix it before it got to this. Before I could respond, a loud knock echoed through the apartment. 3 sharp, heavy bangs. Amber's face went pale. They're here. The next few moments were a blur. Amber grabbed my arm, yanking me toward the back door. We have to go. Now. We bolted down the emergency stairwell, heart pounding in sync with our frantic footsteps. Amber led us into the darkened streets, twisting through back alleys like she'd done this before. What the hell did you get us into? I hissed, struggling to keep up. I didn't have a choice. She shot back, breath ragged. You think I wanted this? Suddenly, tires screeched behind us. A black SUV turned the corner fast, its headlights slicing through the dark like searchlights. Amber grabbed my hand. Run. We didn't stop until we reached a rundown motel miles from my apartment. Amber paid in cash, her hands shaking as she passed the bills to the suspicious-looking clerk. Inside the room, she collapsed onto the edge of the bed, face buried in her hands. I paced the room, adrenaline still surging. Start talking. Now. She looked up, eyes glistening. I borrowed money from the wrong people. After Lisa and I ended, I was desperate. For what? I demanded. Everything, she whispered. Rent, food, just surviving. The weight of her words settled heavily between us. And now they want it back, she continued, voice breaking. With interest. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. So what's the plan, Amber? Keep running until they catch us. She shook her head slowly. There's only one way out. But you're not going to like it. I leaned in, fire burning in my chest. Try me. Her next words shattered what little control I had left. We need Lisa's help. The room went silent after Amber's words hung in the air like a loaded gun. My mind reeled. Lisa, the woman who had already torn my life apart once? The same person who showed up at my apartment like some twisted guardian angel? Couldn't wrap my head around it. You're insane, I hissed, pacing the threadbare motel carpet. After everything, you think going back to Lisa is the answer? Amber's eyes burned with desperation. She's the only one with connections. People who can negotiate with them. Negotiate. I spat the word. These aren't lone officers, Amber. They're killers. She didn't flinch. You think I don't know that? Her voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw how truly terrified she was. Whatever mess she'd fallen into went deeper than I imagined. This wasn't about running anymore, it was survival. Against every instinct screaming at me to walk away, I grabbed my phone and dialed Lisa's number. Lisa met us at a desolate service station just outside town. She stood by her car, arms crossed, the cold wind whipping her hair around her face. Her expression was unreadable, torn between suspicion and reluctant concern. You look like hell, she said flatly when we approached. We need your help. I cut in before Amber could speak. Lisa's gaze flicked to Amber, her lips pressing into a thin line. You must be desperate. Amber lowered her eyes. I am. Lisa sighed, running a hand through her hair. Who's after you? Amber explained everything, names, debts, threats. As she spoke, Lisa's expression darkened. She was calculating, always had been. That side of her had scared me once. Now I needed it. I know a guy, Lisa finally said. He's dangerous but hates the same people chasing you. He might cut you a deal, but it won't be free. Amber nodded without hesitation. I'll do whatever it takes. Lisa's gaze softened for just a moment. You better mean that. The meeting was set for midnight in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The place looked like a scene from a crime thriller. Dark, cold, and soaked in silent menace. Lisa's contact arrived. A tall, scarred man named Victor with dead eyes and a voice like crushed gravel. He listened without interrupting as Amber explained her situation. His expression didn't change once. When she finished, he nodded slowly. Debt like yours doesn't disappear, he said. But I can make it stop being your problem, for a price. Amber swallowed hard. What price? His cold eyes flicked toward me. Him. The world tilted. No, Amber said instantly, stepping in front of me. That's not part of the deal. Victor smirked. It is now. He's leverage, insurance that you won't vanish again. I met Amber's frantic gaze. My gut twisted, but deep down, I knew there was no other way. I'll do it, I said quietly. Jake, no. I grabbed her hands, holding tight. It's the only way. Victor's men moved forward, yanking me away before Amber could protest further. She screamed my name, but I forced myself not to look back. This was the only way to end it for both of us. They kept me locked up in a remote cabin deep in the woods, isolated and watched at all times. Days bled into weeks. I lost track of time, lost track of myself. But then, one stormy night, everything changed. The cabin door burst open with a thunderous crash. Flashlights swept the room. In the chaos, I heard her voice, Amber's. Jake! She cried, her figure appearing like a ghost from the past. Before I could react, Lisa emerged from the shadows, gun drawn, eyes blazing with grim determination. She fired 2 shots, taking down the guards with ruthless precision. Amber rushed to my side, her hands trembling as she fumbled with the chains holding me. I'm getting you out, she sobbed. Lisa covered the doorway, her face set in stone. Move faster. We stumbled into the stormy night, rain soaking us as we ran through the darkened woods. Every breath burned. Every step felt like the last. But somehow we made it to the edge of the forest, to freedom. Victor's men were gone, or dead. We didn't ask questions. Weeks later, Amber and I stood at a small, nameless pier far from the city, bags packed, ready for a fresh start. Lisa leaned against her car, arms crossed, watching from a distance. As we boarded the waiting boat, Amber turned back, her eyes locking with Lisa's. No words were spoken, but the weight of everything they'd shared, love, betrayal, survival, passed between them one last time. Lisa nodded once, her expression softening just for a second before she turned and walked away without looking back. As the boat pulled away from the dock, Amber's fingers laced through mine. The wind carried away the past, leaving only the future ahead, uncertain but ours. No more lies, no more running, just us, finally free.